Cabinet Secretary, let's talk about electric vehicles and charging points. How much is in the Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Fund for the fiscal year 25-26, please? Right,
so there's, in terms of our funding, can I maybe explain that actually in terms of the deployment, the £30 million of the total of £65 million that we've allocated to date, that £30 million is being spent, a lot of it this year. 18 local authorities have already received funding, with another 14 to achieve that in this financial year. Now, what that does is allow a leverage in to enable that kind of investment from private sector, because increasingly I think people are quite aware actually the private sector should be picking up more of the responsibility of that. We set out our EV, the draft implementation plan just at the end of last year. So in terms of the charging area, there will be some EVA funding paid out. We've got paid out to date. In terms of the additional funding, I'll ask officials in terms of where we're likely to get to in relation to next year, but actually most of it is going to be deployment of funding this year for delivery into next year, and a lot of the focus on electric funding next year is on what we can try and do to help vehicles in particular. But if anybody wants to give me any information about additional funding for the EVIF for next year, that would be helpful.
Kerry, what would be very helpful to know what's been paid out so far and what's going to be paid out this year.
So I can tell you that £4 million have been paid out generally to local authorities, £18 million this year.
How much?
4 million, just over 4 million, 18 million to the local authorities to date, and then the remainder of the 30 million, which is for this year, will be paid out to local authorities in the coming months before the end of this financial year.
All of yes. The balance. So, sorry, yes. Did I get that right? You paid £4 million out this year, is what you said to me.
So 2.25 million was paid out in previous years, so 23-24 on initial scoping plans, and a further 2 million we expect to be claimed by the end of this year for more plans. So that's a total of 4, and then our expectation at the moment is that the additional 26 million, all of that will be paid out in grant offer letters by the end of this financial year. That's the trajectory we're on at the moment in terms of bids coming in from local authorities. So at the moment it's all contained within this year's budget, and the expectation is it will go out this year. If any doesn't go out this year because of the firm commitment to the 30, we will ensure it's funded next year. And
I can reassure you that they're all standing ready. We've done, I've visited Ayrshire, where they are actually going to be able to move. They were explaining very quickly, and also there's a leverage where they can also, for every pound invested, I think it's about £3.20, they can leverage in from private investment to expand that. So in terms of that scale up, you'll be starting to see more of that scale up. But we already, as you know, have met our commitment 2 years early of reaching 6,000 EV chargers by 2026. That was done in 2024.
I know, as the Cabinet Secretary for Finance said to me in the Chamber, and I asked the same question, but of the 2.3 million that's been paid out and the 2 million that's projected to be paid out in the short term, how much private capital has been raised to balance that?
So those initial spending would have been about some of the planning activity. The actual deployment, which I referred to as 18, just correct me if I'm, but that's gone to, for example, there's a Highlands and North consortium. Again, it's bringing local authorities together as a package. The Glasgow and Ayrshire one was done probably round about November, so they've got those funds.
Yeah, I'm trying to work out. Sorry, the point of the £60 million fund was £30 million was to come from the government, and £30 million would be deployed by private investment. So I'm trying to work out, the government, as I understand it, has near enough contributed 4.3 million. I'm wanting to see that 4.3 million pounds has been generated from private investment.
So I think I've said more than that. So in terms of there's 18 million pounds gone to the consortiums. That's the kind of, like Ayrshire and Glasgow have come together, and there was a package announced. In fact, we did it when the Scottish Government went to Ayr and held its cabinet, and I met all the different partners that were involved there. So that funding has gone out. All I'm saying is that there's probably a remainder. There's a remainder of funding to go out this financial year. The majority of the £30 million has been issued, and they are, as part of those, the proposals, there is a leverage, as I said, on average of £3.20 for every pound of public investment to generate additional investment from the private sector. In terms of the deployment, since most of that, I think when I was in Inverness and I announced the Inverness allocation for that Highland and North, that was they would have then start deploying it. So obviously when they're working with their partners, they're then developing and implementing and delivering the actual charges. In addition to that, you'll absolutely know that there's private sector chargers developing all over the place in terms of, for example, the rapid charger in Dundee. I officially opened that last year as well. So the pace and rate is absolutely increasing. You'll see that more in deployment next year. The funding has gone out this year. And then anywhere outside London within the UK, we are in a strong position.
Okay, so one of the points you made there is about rural.
Yeah.
And I don't want to be parochial about the Highlands and Islands, but big distances to travel, more hills to climb, less charging points. I think I would like to know how you're going to target those areas. Are they getting an increased level of funding compared to Dundee, which you mentioned, and Ayr, which you mentioned? I didn't hear a single place mentioned that was north of Perth.
I think I did. I think I said when I was in Inverness, I announced one of the early allocations for this year was for the North. Was for the North Consortium.
Inverness is only halfway to the top, though.
Well, you mentioned Perth, right? I think, to be fair, I talked about the Highlands and Isles in the North allocation. What I can say to you is, recognising the points you make, in addition to the £30 million that's been spent this year, there will be an additional money in the 25-26 budget specifically for rural and islands connectivity. Now, that might not leverage in the same level of private funding, because it might be more attractive, we understand, for cities such as Inverness or cities such as Aberdeen, but certainly for north of Inverness and also on our islands, we need to make sure that there is that provision. And that's why there's an additional amount of funding for next year that's specifically for rural and islands connectivity.